So, Chapter 22 of Boruto's Two Blue Vortex is right around the corner, and things are kind of looking bleak. See, because, well, Chapter 21 showed us the defeat of not only Ryu, but also Matsuri, meaning 3 out of the 5 total Shinju in existence are gone, most likely. Unfortunately, because of how the chapter ends, that doesn't necessarily feel like a victory. See, because the end of Chapter 21 showed Boruto using his flying Raishin to jump to the battlefield where Team 7 and 2/3 were battling against the 2 Shinju. And while that seems hype, and it was hype because Boruto arrived on the battlefield and cut down Matsuri, as Jura is able to perceive anything that goes on with any of the Shinju through their connected Rinnegan, Jura, the second that Boruto jumped onto the battlefield and cut down Matsuri, was made aware of Boruto's presence there. And as the battlefield is still littered with claw grimes that Ryu summoned in the battle against Sarada and Mitsuki, there are tons of ways that Jura could be on that battlefield in the drop of a hat. And thus many believe that is exactly what's going to happen in Chapter 22 of Boruto, a fated rematch between Boruto and Jura, which would not be good for Boruto. See, we know for a fact that Boruto is not as strong as Jura. This is why Kawaki needed to get the limiters taken off him by Amado. And we know that a battle between Boruto and Jura would not pan out well because Kashin Koji, who can literally see the future, told us in all the universes where Boruto jumps into action in this battle, Boruto dies. So how is Boruto gonna get out of this potentially fatal battle against Jura upcoming in Chapter 22? While to some of you the answer may seem as though it's simply just jumping away using flying Raijin, unfortunately, I don't believe that's an option for Boruto. And thus the only answer is to stand and fight. But how is Boruto going to stand and fight against a stronger foe while simultaneously trying to protect his largely injured group of friends? Well, the answer is Borushiki. Yes, I believe Boruto's way more powerful other side may be seen in Chapter 22. Momoshiki has very quietly been biding his time inside of Boruto for the last 3 years, and we haven't seen anything from Momoshiki since Chapter 80 of Part 1, where Momoshiki realized that Boruto would not give in to the pressure of the entire world turning against him. But in a moment where Boruto needs additional power to save his loved ones, an opportunity may be presented for Momoshiki to retake the stage. And as crazy as that sounds, there's actually a fair amount of evidence to back it up. So with no further ado, let's get directly into Borushiki will fight Jura. But before we get to talking about a legendary battle between 2 Otsutsuki level threats, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video a week, you guys can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the 4th wall link in the description below. We're on to the Chunin exams. So, we've talked about at multiple different times about how Shippuden and Two Blue Vortex have too many connections to ignore. In fact, Shippuden and Two Blue Vortex are so incredibly similar that you can pretty consistently and pretty accurately use story beats from Shippuden to guess what's gonna happen in Two Blue Vortex. Don't believe me? Okay. Both Shippuden and Two Blue Vortex begin with the establishment of a shady organization of criminals or antagonists. In Shippuden's case, the Akatsuki, and in Two Blue Vortex's case, the Shinju. And both these organizations are targeting specific and key figures in Naruto's story. In Shippuden, that being the Jinchurikis, and in Two Blue Vortex, that being the people who were turned into Shinju loved the most. On top of that, one of the first battles against this shady organization is not only between that shady organization and Team 10, but also leads to the fatal injury of one of the key members of Team 10, as Hidan is responsible for Asuma's death, and Jura punches a cannonball-sized tree root through Inujin's chest that would have killed him without Himawari's healing. On top of this, the first real arc in both Shippuden and Two Blue Vortex takes place in the Land of Wind, because the Kazekage, Gaara, is kidnapped in some capacity, and a broken iteration of Team 7 that doesn't involve one of the original members has to go to the Land of Wind to save said Kazekage. And thus, while Two Blue Vortex and Shippuden are almost definitely not one-to-one copies of each other, there's too many similarities for us to ignore. And thus, like I said earlier, we can use Shippuden as a way to predict the events of Two Blue Vortex. And thus, we kind of have to ask ourselves the question, why are we in the Land of Wind right now? See, in Shippuden, the first arc taking place in the Land of Wind made a lot of sense. The Akatsuki are after the Jinchuriki, and the only Jinchuriki that we knew that wasn't Naruto was Gaara, and thus the Akatsuki targeting Gaara was a good good place for us to start the journey of understanding what the Akatsuki were after, because it's not like we could start with Naruto. That wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't build up any hype. And thus Gaara, who was also coincidentally the Jinchuriki of the One Tails, so a pretty good starting point, was selected as the first target of the Akatsuki so we could understand their mission. But we don't have that same rationale in Two Blue Vortex. Yes, it is lightly established in Two Blue Vortex that seemingly the Shinju are operating somewhere on the border of the Land of Wind, and thus because they're operating somewhere around the border of the Land of Wind, that the Land of Wind sent a search party to figure out what was going on with them, and that search party just so happened to include Shinki, Gaara, Araya, and Yodo. Cool, I mean, yeah, that could technically be a reason as to why we're in the Land of Wind, but there's nothing deeper to that reasoning than we're in the Land of Wind because we're in the Land of Wind. Unless, of course, there is some major plot payoff down the line that the Shinju are operating out of the Land of Wind for some specific reason, which is like kind of a possibility, I guess, but doesn't necessarily seem like one worth discussing. And thus, the question here becomes, why involve Gaara and Shinki in this arc? I mean, it's not like any of the Shinju, pre-Ryu, had any connection to the Land of Wind whatsoever. Matsuri wanted Konohamaru, the Bug Shinju wanted Ada, Hidari wanted Sarada, and Jura wants some combination of Naruto, Boruto, and Himawari. Four people who are all very snugly placed inside of Konoha, so why be in the Land of Wind? Well, one of the logical answers here is that Jura is forbidding anybody from going to Konoha and mucking about in the city streets because of his fascination and interest in not only Konoha, but its people. And that is a possibility. If the fight was going to happen in Konoha, it had to happen somewhere else. And as the Land of Wind is pretty consistently the second most explored place in the Naruto universe outside of the Land of Fire, the Land of Wind seemed like a pretty logical landing point, especially because Gaara and Shinki, two characters we know an okay amount about, are there. But I don't think that's the answer. See, if we're moving forward with the idea that Shippuden teaches us a lot about what we're going to see upcoming in Two Blue Vortex, then we have to look at the main characters of both of these stories. See, both Naruto and Boruto had time skips where they went and trained with a master who was some iteration of Jiraiya. Now, in the case of Naruto, even though he was gone away training with Jiraiya for 3 whole years, really all he learned while training with Jiraiya was a big ball Rasengan and how to break out of Genjutsu. However, any and all progress he made was technically hindered by the fact that when he came back from the time skip, he had worse control of Kurama. See, because while Naruto was seemingly able to access Kurama's chakra pre-time skip, whether it was in the battle against Haku or the battle against Sasuke, with seemingly no repercussions, the first time that we see Naruto access Kurama's chakra post-time skip is when him and the new iteration of Team 7 that includes Yamato and Sai bump into Orochimaru, and Orochimaru basically tells Naruto that he's nothing special and that Sasuke hates him and that he'll never see him again, which causes Naruto to manifest a four-tailed version 2 Kurama cloak that goes on a complete and total rampage, injuring Sakura and battling against Orochimaru. A rampage that, mind you, was only ended because Yamato had been assigned to Team 7. And that's important. Keep that in your mind for a second. And Yamato had been assigned to Team 7 because it had been established by Jiraiya when he came back to Konoha with Naruto that the power inside of Naruto was growing more and more uncontrollably, to the point where a four-tailed Naruto almost killed Jiraiya during the time skip. And Boruto's time skip experience is somewhat similar to that of his father's. See, while Boruto comes back massively more powerful than he was pre-time skip, having learned things like Rasengan Uzuhiko and Flying Raijin, his time skip does hold one similarity with that of his father's, and that is that the power inside of him, in Boruto's case Momoshiki, became substantially more volatile over the course of the time skip. See, because pre-time skip Boruto was able to use the power of Momoshiki somewhat consistently, amping his power by unleashing his karma marking. Boruto was able to stand toe-to-toe with the likes of a karma mark wielding Kawaki, or Code. However, we learned somewhat recently in Two Blue Vortex that after the events of Omnipotence and about a year into the time skip, when Sasuke and Boruto were cornered by Code and an army of Claw Grimes, Boruto tried to use his karma marking, but when he tried to use it, he felt as though Momoshiki was taking over his body. And thus Boruto post-time skip no longer has access to one of his more powerful assets, which is the karma marking. In fact, the karma marking has become more of a hindrance than a power, as even the sheer manifestation of the karma marking via resonance with Kawaki's forces Boruto out of any and all fights, as he has to go find a secluded place to force his karma marking back in. And thus Boruto, even though his time skip is a lot more successful than Naruto's, comes back into the story in a very similar situation as Naruto, filled with an incredibly dangerous power that he no longer has control over. However, there is one key difference between what Naruto had in Shippuden and what Boruto does not have in Two Blue Vortex post their respective time skips, and that is Yamato. See, Yamato is introduced into the story as a wood-style user specifically so that Naruto can train using Kurama's chakra without fear of him raging out and destroying the entire village. And thus, without the help of Yamato, Naruto probably never would have been put in the situation where he was able to figure out how to use Kurama's chakra. But Boruto doesn't have those same opportunities. Boruto, as it currently stands, has just sworn off the concept of using Momoshiki's powers in hopes that one day Momoshiki will just kind of disappear forever. However, as we know from the first chapter and first episode of Boruto, at one point in either the near or far future, Boruto does regain mastery of the karma marking, being able to use Momoshiki's powers in his upcoming battle with Kawaki. And thus, somehow, some way, Boruto remasters the karma marking in the same way that Naruto mastered Kurama's chakra. But how is Boruto expected to do this without a Yamato? Well, therein lies the answer as to why we're currently in the land of wind. See, it's established in the beginning of this arc that apparently Shinki's got some next level sealing jutsu. Shinki, whilst being sealed inside of a tree by a claw grime biting into his skin, was able to build a cocoon of iron sand around Gaara. A cocoon of iron sand that A, nobody was able to break down, and B, put Gaara into some form of a stasis. Meaning one, Gaara wouldn't succumb to the pretty bad injuries he had prior to being sealed, and two, meaning even if insanely powerful people like Jura, Hidari, or Matsuri tried to break down this iron sand cocoon, they wouldn't be able to. And that's nuts. We don't actually give that moment enough credit. The literal only way for that iron sand cocoon to be broken down was for Ryu to find said iron sand cocoon and use his iron sand, which is obviously a derivative of Shinki's, to free Gaara, essentially. But why do this? Why establish Shinki as maybe the best Fuinjutsu user in all of the Boruto universe right now? Well, because Shinki is going to become Boruto's Yamato. See, the ability to create an iron sand cocoon that's so incredibly powerful that even people like Jura aren't able to break through it means that if hypothetically Shinki was able to use this kind of cocoon against somebody like, oh, I don't know, Borushiki, that he'd be able to seal away and suppress the power of a rampaging Borushiki. On top of this, when you consider the fact that it was established that Ryu, through the usage of his iron sand, which like we said is a derivative of Shinki's, was able to control the bodily movements of whoever was coated in said iron sand, kind of highlights Shinki as the perfect potential person to control and seal the powers of a rampaging Borushiki without having to kill him, which is something that we've already dabbled with, and a talking point that was incredibly pertinent when we were dealing with Naruto losing control of Kurama's chakra. Because really, the only reason that Jiraiya almost died to a four-tailed Naruto was because Jiraiya wasn't trying to kill a four-tailed Naruto. He was only trying to place a sealing tag on his forehead. And thus, if Boruto ever really wants a shot at controlling the power of Momoshiki so that he can use it down the line like we know that he does need the injection of a character who'd be able to seal away his power if Borushiki ever took over again. And I genuinely believe that this role of sealing away a rampaging Borushiki is about to become very relevant very quickly. See, as we established in the beginning of this video, chapter 22 is most likely going to feature a fight between Jura and Boruto. Boruto has jumped onto the battlefield using his flying Raijin and cut down Matsuri to save Konohamaru's life. And while some may say that Boruto is just going to use flying Raijin a couple of times to transport all of Team 7 and 2/3 back to his hideout with Kashin Koji, I don't think that's that likely. Not only are Konohamaru and the rest of Team 7 and 2/3 split up by a pretty substantial distance, so much so that Matsuri didn't even feel, hear, or understand that there was a battle between the rest of Team 7 and 2/3 and Ryu, but also a vast majority of Team 7 and 2/3 is incapacitated in some way or another. Whether it's Konohamaru being stuffed full of giant splinters, Sarada being unconscious from chakra overusage, Yodo suffering from cannonball-sized hole-in-the-chest syndrome, or Raya just fighting a very, very hard-fought battle against Ryu, pretty much the only person who's in any shape to fight whatsoever is Mitsuki, who's already activated and deactivated his Snake Sage mode, and we don't know how many times he's able to enter into that form per day. And thus, in the hypothetical circumstance where Boruto has to use Flying Raijin on each and every single member of Team 7 and 2/3, he wouldn't be getting that much help. Tie that into the fact that Jura can re-enter the battlefield really whenever he wants to instantaneously, and yeah, the chances that Boruto is able to get all of Team 7 and 2/3 away from the battlefield before Jura shows up and starts mucking things up is slim to none. And thus, Boruto in chapter 22 is almost definitely going to be forced into a fight that he cannot win. It's been established by both Boruto and Kashin Koji that Boruto needs Kawaki to win this fight against Jura. And as Kawaki is nowhere to be found in the Land of Wind, as he's currently going through the process of having his limiters removed by Amado, and we are still pretty far away from a final battle against Jura. That means that Boruto is not gonna have help in this fight. But if Boruto needs somebody equally as strong as him, which is stronger than all of Team 7 and 2/3 probably combined, just to have a chance in a fight against Jura, then how poorly is this upcoming 1v1 against Jura gonna go? Well, probably not great. In fact, to even stand a chance, Boruto's almost definitely gonna need to reach pretty deep into his bag. And I think at the bottom of his bag, when he's about elbow deep, he's gonna remember, oh yeah, there's a high-ranking Otsutsuki inside of me, and this moment is going to very closely mirror when Naruto was fighting against Orochimaru. See, while Naruto manifested Kurama because he was so furious with Orochimaru for taking Sasuke away, I believe the reason that Borushiki will manifest will be less because Boruto is furious and more because he knows he needs power. However, there is a fair to decent chance, especially considering the fact that all of the claw grimes that Ryu summoned to the battlefield are currently around Sarada, Mitsuki, Ireya, and Yodo, that Jura, to incentivize a battle between himself and Boruto, will take somebody amongst Team 7 and 2/3 hostage, which could definitely cause Boruto to crash out, awakening Borushiki. However, just like with Naruto manifesting the Four Tails in the battle against Orochimaru, this power will come with consequences. Borushiki will take over, and while that will almost definitely level the playing field against somebody like Jura, I also believe that the consequences that we'll see will be pretty similar to the consequences we saw back in Shippuden. See, because while the four-tailed version of Naruto was able to fight against Orochimaru pretty evenly, which eventually led to Orochimaru and Kabuto needing to retreat, the consequences to this tie was the fact that that version of Naruto injured Sakura in his blind rage, a moment that made Naruto realize that he needed to get not only his rage, but also Kurama under control. And in the hypothetical circumstance where Borushiki does take over Boruto's body, I believe there is a fairly good chance that something very similar could happen to Boruto, where Momoshiki, who's currently in charge, could see Sarada, a girl who should remind him of Sasuke, the man who he deemed as the biggest threat to his health, and decide that while he's in the driver's seat, the best way to not only get Boruto to give in to his depression, but also eliminate any and all possible threats to his health would be to take out Sarada. And this would be a crazy stressful moment for Boruto, as Boruto undoubtedly still feels horrendous about stabbing Sasuke in his 6-Tomei Rinnegan and making Sasuke incredibly less relevant in terms of the grand power scheme of Boruto. I mean, after all, Boruto is kind of the reason that Sasuke was turned into a Shinju in the first place, and he almost definitely would have been able to get out of the situation he was placed in a year into the time skip if he had his Rinnegan, which Boruto was responsible for destroying. And thus, yeah, if Momoshiki was able to injure Sarada or even convince Boruto that he had killed her, that would deal a massive blow to Boruto's mental health, possibly sending him down the path of giving in to Momoshiki's pressure. However, just like how Yamato was responsible for the ending of Naruto's rampage after his battle against Orochimaru, I believe this is where Shinki's importance will be revealed. See, it's important to note here that Ryu has been completely and totally eviscerated, with even his Soul Thorn showing degradation. And therefore, on top of the fact that I believe Chapter 22 is going to kick off the battle between Boruto and Jura, I believe this chapter is also going to show us the return of Shinki, who may or may not get a chakra boost from being freed from the God Tree. See, it's important to note here that we don't know how people are freed from the God Tree. We don't know if they're freed the second a Soul Thorn is destroyed. We don't know if the Soul Thorn has to be pushed into the tree or the person. We can't say. However, one of the possibilities is that the person needs to be fused with the Soul Thorn of the Shinju. And that, combined with the fact that that person has been sitting, basking in the power of a ill-formed God Tree for at least a couple of days, if not years, could lead to a relatively crazy chakra boost. In fact, a lot of people hypothesize this chakra boost to be so great that Sasuke, once Hidari is defeated, will come back not only with his right eye healed, but also his right arm returned. And thus Shinki could be the next character in Two Blue Vortex to get a relatively crazy power boost. And if we assume that we've come to the Land of Wind to reintroduce Shinki as not only a relevant but present character in Two Blue Vortex, a power boost would be fairly necessary. And thus I believe that not only will we see Borushiki in the upcoming chapters, but we'll also see a newly revived Shinki stepping forward as Two Blue Vortex's Yamato, sealing away Boruto's powers using his Iron Sand, or at least slowing Boruto down enough so that he can win the internal struggle against Momoshiki and reseed control of his body. And thus now, with the injection of Shinki into the story, Boruto may be able to train in the releasing of his karma marking without the fear of Borushiki taking over and destroying the whole world. All that is to say, say that chapter 22 is going to be absolutely massive. Or maybe I'm wrong about all of this, and chapter 22 is going to be a complete and total snorefest. But what do you guys think? Do you believe there's a possibility we see Borushiki in the upcoming chapters? And if we do you believe it's going to be up to Shinki to seal him away? Tell me in the comments below. And while it goes down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to wait for the scans of chapter 1148 of One Piece to drop so I can do my first ever One Piece manga chapter review.